Hi, I'm Shakti Durga. Welcome to the Goddess Speaks podcast. This is a collection of discourses from the ancient goddess Artha, containing spiritual energy and activations and discussions of those discourses. I hope that the teachings are beneficial to you on your personal journey of enlightenment. Mother Artha opens the book and flicks through the pages. And she asks each of you to come into the book today. Imagine that your consciousness, your subtle bodies can just come into the pages of the book, which she's showing us as a garden, crossing over a small bridge like a Japanese bridge, into a place where there's just a lot of beauty, natural beauty, beauty of the natural world, like a prairie with mountains all around, the types of wildflowers and animals that appeal to your senses. And everything here is friendly. Doesn't matter if it's a bison or a passing bird or snake. There is nothing here that is in any way harmful. And everything is here as an expression of the highest consciousness that is possible for that form of life, expressing as the divine prototype. And way back in the annals of mankind, the divine, in fact, gave a prototype for humanity. This has been called Adam Cadman in the Western mysteries, and Lord Manu in the Eastern mysteries. The divine design for mankind, created by the divine itself, made in the image of the divine, is something that must be understood from expanded consciousness and not from the physical consciousness that takes up so much of the time of any person whilst they are within a physical body. The divine does not look like a human. Made in the image of the divine is made to a divine blueprint and specification into which the divine poured itself. And in that way, certainly, there is an image that was formed by the divine, which gave the blueprint for humanity. This species was created much like any other species. There is a conundrum in the understanding of evolution, because evolution exists, but also the divine design of the divine itself exists, and these two things interpenetrate each other. The divine design of Adam Cadman, the divine design given forth by Manu, may share genetic predisposition with other mammals of this particular terra firma, and those animals and mammals share much genetic information as well. But the way mankind currently holds its science in this way is not the fulsomeness of the truth of the way in which the divine designed us all. Certainly there is a role to play for the evolutionary forces that work through humanity, but it is a human chain of evolution, and the souls that enter into this human chain of evolution are given a blueprint through which they can work. Some souls also partake of other chains of evolution before becoming human, and these blueprints are somewhere within the distant memory of many of the peoples of the earth. The peoples of the earth are not homogeneous in their roots. This should be obvious from the great diversity that is to be found within the human families, both in their terrestrial conditioning, the colour, the size, the shape, the characteristics and qualities embodied in various races, but also the various temperaments, very different from each other. This is not random and it's not chance. It's from an evolutionary ethos coming from long ago. The divine placed itself into the shape of mankind or manus, as it placed itself into the shape of angelic beings, as it placed itself into the shape of monkey beings and elephant beings, the divine placed itself into these shapes for the population of the garden of creation itself. This was done with a view to creating beauty and love and giving rise to expressions of divine grace, to allow then for there to be an evolution and development. These you could call seeds of the race of man were planted not just on this earth, but in other places as well. And there are other places in the great cosmos in which a similar form to your own is having its life. This should hardly be surprising, given the size of the universe and the divine design. It is not necessarily the divine design that each of these worlds find each other, but at various times in the very long histories and rounds of creation, there has been some intermingling. The divine has created not just in the physical form, but has created through all layers, similar to the V diagram, but much more complicated, much more nuanced. And the divine has been creating in all of these different worlds and universes since time began. Without time, creation cannot really take its place, as there is no stage, there's nowhere to put anything. There can be no division without space and time. These things too come from the mind of the divine, and the illumination that flows through space and time, and the energy and the binding together of energy and light and space and time has created all of the forms that your mind is capable of understanding, viewing, and having any form of cognizance around. There are areas of exploration in the cosmos about which speculation can be very pleasant, and the divine is likely to give visions to those who are interested in cosmology. And there will be an interweaving of many parts of the whole as it's given in small parts to each of the people who search. It is the divine design always that for the whole picture to emerge, people must share and they must co-construct with each other to get a greater sense of what the totality is truly about. That the human wishes to own information is part of its egoic nature and not the way of the divine. The way of the divine is a flow and a sharing, and this does not diminish the being who brought forth the information, but allows for a flavor to come in through that being to then be shared in some way with the rest of the world. Nor does this prevent that there be economics involved in the world in which you find yourself. This is the way that humanity has brought forth the evolutionary plan. And one must live in accordance with the customs and cultures into which one finds oneself incarnated. There are very great changes, as you already perceive, coming to your world. And it is important that the lightworkers are able to fashion a vision of a better world emerging from the chaos that is coming. Your humanity and your divine training will stand you in good stead as the world goes through the changes that have already been set in motion and which are unstoppable now. The divine will always enter into the battlefield when the forces of chaos, divisiveness, and darkness become too large. And there'll be a kind of a reckoning which is not judgmental and not punitive, but is certainly the is of rectification, where one finds oneself in the ebb and flow of the tides of changing energy depends upon the preparation one has made. Each of you is preparing properly through your spiritual practices for the inevitable changes and evolutions that you will face in your life. Change is the nature of life on earth, as much as we try and stop it, as much as we try and freeze frame the parts we like. It is the evolution of consciousness that is important in your life stream, not unchanging pleasantness. You know from the stories of the various scriptures of the indulgences that the pleasure grounds can bring, and how for some this can stifle their spirituality as they rest in the pleasure grounds that are created by the divine for the enjoyment of all, but they do not arouse from their partial slumber to go about the normal business of sharing, of helping, of serving, of enabling others to find the pleasurable as well. But instead, it becomes a kind of soporific activity of pleasantness. For those who are entitled under the current system, there are always changes being brought forth. Even the changes in the coastline of countries is part of the plan of the divine, that nothing stays the same forever. There will never be a regime that is entrenched forever. No matter how ghastly or wonderful a regime may be in the world, one can take solace in the fact that it will always be temporary. Whichever power is dominant in the world at any given time is but a cycle in the overall history of humanity. Whether one lives in poverty or plenty, this too is a cycle. It is how do we grow the internal landscape that we feel connected to the whole of the universe, regardless of where on the cycle we may find ourselves at any given time. How do we be in the presence of such truth that we understand that there is nothing that can ever block our unification with the divine, and there is nothing that can ever get in the way of the vast bliss of the inner illumination. The sorrow at letting go of forms and structures and people that we've loved in various ways, either through the intercession of the inevitability of the demise of the physical body, or through being parted by distance, or by other circumstances, either planned or unplanned. There is a connection that can never be broken, and it is our spirituality and our training that allows for these connections to be held steadfast, that throughout whichever change is coming, our vision is steadfast, that the world becomes a better place, a more humane place, a more compassionate society, where the discord of the age that we are leaving becomes part of that which becomes a solution for the next age. We take the problems and we turn them into solutions and opportunities. This is the nature of the Vishuddha Chakra. It takes that which is imperfect and it finds a way to perfect it. And in so doing, will create further imbalances and imperfections, which at a later turn of the spiral of evolution will require another adjustment, another reset to occur, to shake people out of their complacency as we move through the bell curve of usefulness of any structure created by the human mind. The human is always wishing to prove the point that is unprovable, that more is good, and therefore more would be better, and much more would be better than that, and more and more and more would be indeed better and better and better. The human brain, when it is controlled by the ego, is uncomfortable with the idea of cycles and bell curves, and the idea that the path of moderation is in fact the best path for all. The path of moderation means not denying and not hoarding. It means that there is a fluidity and a movement that vibrates in accordance with the circumstances, that the fixedness of the egoic construct is replaced by a vibrant and responsive consciousness that is linked to your higher soul. Getting through the times that are coming will require a lot of love, a lot of patience, and for those whose hearts and minds are drawn inexorably into the worst case that could happen, into the most fearful abyss, then the sympathy of the spiritual hierarchy is with you. For this is the path of suffering, beloveds. And so, when change stirs the embers in the heart and a feeling issues forth, whatever that feeling might be, acknowledge it, thank it, but you have the wherewithal not to allow the negativity of consciousness, the separateness of consciousness, to be your ruling dominion. Of the inner plane, there are so many countless families of light. There are countless shades of light. There are different rays of light given forth by the divine, which are not always compatible, and yet each in its own way is filled with goodness. From the human perspective, we see darkness as evil and light as good. But this is the kind of metaphor that is suitable for a small child. Within the heavenly realms, imagine that each of the colours on a giant colour wheel gives forth a nuance in consciousness, and an entire civilization can be built from it, and has been. And yet one on the olive shade may not sit quietly with one in the purple shade, and yet both in their own way are beautiful. And it is just the way they go about things does not suit the temperament of those of a different predisposition. And then starts the demonization of the otherness. Then starts othering. That is not this. This is not that. We are separate. We are different from each other, and thus you must be wrong. Seems to be the way that the human consciousness is constructed. It takes great ones to be able to solve these dilemmas and not plunge humanity further into chaos. One can see through current world events the effect that one person can have on plunging a world into chaos. One can see that even with good intention, this can be so. One can have good intentions, but because of the divisive nature of consciousness, be deluded and never know that they are deluded. This is possible for anyone, in any level of consciousness to which they have attained, for in every being who remains on the earth plane, there is some area in which delusion can set itself in train. How quickly can you pick this up and rectify the consciousness is the question, not whether or not you will ever be deluded. With what sweetness, with what grace can you come back from a mistake? These are the things that perfume the soul. These are the things that bring forth the attention of the hierarchies of light that will lift you over the hardest hurdles. Each of you is connected to a great army of light beings who are at your disposal, but with whom you must create relationship. For without that relationship, you, in your human beingness, cannot quite grasp the handles and ladders of light that the angelic realms are always putting in front of you. They go unseen and you walk straight through them. The idea of paying greater attention walks hand in hand with a teaching that has become very mainstream, which is called being more mindful in one's life. It means paying attention. And in the common vernacular, it means paying attention to what your physical reality is doing right in this moment. There is more to mindfulness than this, because one can start to bring to mind things that are beyond the physical. One can start to become more mindful of the guidance one is receiving. One can start to become more mindful of one's connections to the inner plane beings. One can appreciate the patterns that are set forth by the divine through the various chains of evolution, which are ladders for you to climb, with handrails and guide rails, and seats for resting from time to time. Because of humanity's entrenchment in what it currently perceives to be correct and incorrect, right and wrong, divine and not divine, most of the help that is available is not perceived. This does not create sadness in the divine. The divine is truly incapable of sadness or disappointment. There is nothing you can do to make the divine happy or not happy. However, there is a blazing of love when you turn your attention towards the divine. As you give a little love to the divine will douse you in love. This is not really a reward. It is just a result of your own loveliness, that you are beginning to feel more and more of this loveliness. You know the law of karma. And it is a truth that many find difficult to accept, that the law of karma operates differently depending upon how exalted your consciousness has become. When the consciousness has become exalted, the path truly can be said to be narrower. There is less margin for error allowed within the folds of graciousness of karma, because the power of the one who wields such power is so great that to be miscued can create mayhem. At the same time, anything one does to assist one of the exalted ones on this planet creates a reflection in your own karma that is multiples of times greater than it would be for a being of lesser consciousness. Assisting the beings that hold the vastest amounts of light will change you and your consciousness. It will exalt you in your life. The beings of whom I speak will already have in their sights plans to lift humanity. And you may think, why don't we just lift everyone individually? Which you can. But the assistance of the great ones brings you a manifold expression of divine grace that will be super effective in lifting all. It is as though, as one's consciousness expands into the infinite light and love that is the potential of all of us, things get louder. The effects of any action echo more throughout the cosmos. And we enter into these fields by our love for such great exalted beings. We are lifted into these fields of opportunity to make a difference. And in so doing, people will be lifted in ways beyond our comprehension, as well as through the efforts of the group endeavor. The divine has designed humanity such that group effort is required, and not all groups work in the same way. What is right in one group will be wrong in another group. And this is not incorrect. It is correct. This is to allow for diversity without making one right and one wrong. One is not evil and one is not good. Both are working in a different ray type, in a different family of divine grace, working towards the one commonality that they will eventually find, as will we. It is good, beloved ones, at any stage of consciousness, to continue the work of love, to find the grace, to find the spark of divine in any being. Be patient with this work and allow yourself to unfold into this work. It is an insurance policy against error. And to understand that the human mind is not the optimal instrument of consciousness, and should be but a servant of your higher soul. When you make the mind the glorified instrument of consciousness, it wishes to restrict its field of operation to that which is physical and tangible, and other things are relegated to a less important place in your life, which in fact, on the greater scale of things, is turning reality inside out and upside down. For the greatest and most real things are those you cannot see. These are the most great and real things in any chain of evolution, because you feel them internally, you know them spiritually, you are one with them energetically. They are the essence of your happiness and joy. The physical things that flow from these states are merely an evidence of an inner state. And those who say one must feel it before we make it are truly speakers of the light. Have faith, beloveds, that through any portal of change, there will be karmic gains and losses. These should not be lamented, but one should play one's part to help all we can help, to stay connected to the divine in each other, and to know that beyond the transformation comes new opportunity and new solidarity, a kinder, more generous world is possible. And if you can hold your center and your vision through the eye of a storm, then very great assistance will be with you at all times. And when it becomes too hard, call upon the divine that you be carried, and have faith, beloveds, that you are being watched over, that help will always be available to you, and that the ultimate objective that you have in your life is self-realization, the power to love more than you've ever loved before, and to help raise human consciousness to a whole new level, a new and wondrous earth to evolve and then be formed and maintained for the human family. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Goddess Speaks. If so, please share it with your friends and your family so they can benefit too. If you'd like to connect with me, visit my website, shaktidurga.com.